Welcome back. In Algebra 2, we have our last lesson of the semester. Unbelievable to be wrapping up that first semester in Chapter 5 right here, 5.9. We're going to have a quadratic equation, and a quadratic equation is something that you have already worked with and you've already solved. It's just that every time you'd solve in the past, we'd be very, very fortunate to either have factoring show up to our rescue, or perhaps we could use square roots to help us solve. So what we're going to see today is we have a brand new approach to solving quadratic equations, regardless of whether the expression can factor or whether you'd even be able to take square roots. So look, we'll have ax squared plus bx plus c. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of x, c is the constant. Look right here at this 2x squared plus x minus 1. I hope it's not too much of a stretch to see that a, the number in front of x squared, is 2, b, the number in front of x is a 1, c is negative 7. By the way, we need to get 0 on that right-hand side there. If we don't have 0 on the right, we have to get it there. We have to do some kind of work on both sides. Why do I bring that up? Look at this next problem. 10x squared minus 5x equals 3. We have to do a little bit of work. We're going to have to minus a 3 from both sides. That's going to leave us with 10x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Once we get that, our a will be 10. Our b will be negative 5. And our c will be negative 3. For our last little identification of a, b, and c here, we're going to have to do quite a bit of work. If I gave you 3x squared equals 8x minus 4, you can see that we'd have to move that 8x minus an 8x from both sides. Simultaneously, we'll have to add a 4 to both sides. And that's going to leave us with 3x squared minus 8x plus 4. And then on the right-hand side, you can see many kids even draw a little bar down there. You can see we'd get 0. A, the number in front of x squared, will be a 3. B, the number in front of x, is negative 8. C, the number that we have as a constant, added or subtracted, is a 4. Now, the reason why we need to identify A, B, and C is we're going to be using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula can be used to solve any quadratic equation, regardless of whether you are able to factor, regardless of whether you'd be able to take square roots on both sides or not. You're going to be able to get an answer, or to get two answers if you're really on your toes. Every quadratic, you can see we're going to wind up with getting two solutions, and the solutions could even be duplicates of each other. But this formula right here is what we are going to be using. X is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, the very first thing you need to do, taking a look at example 1, is to identify what your a is, what your b is. B would equal 3 here, and what your c is. C would have to equal negative 5. And of course, what we're going to do is just plain and simply substitute these values in and work this out, find out what we get here. Now, the cool thing is, once you know what b squared minus 4ac is, really, you're pretty much done with that quadratic formula. I hope it's pretty obvious to you that seems to be the vast, big work here. Rather than even work this out by hand, you can get a little bit of help by storing values in. Like a is 1. I can say 1, hit that store button right next to the 1, and then hit alpha a. Alpha a, as you look in green here, a is right above that math button. Hit enter and you're good to go. Let's go 3, store. Now I'm going to hit alpha b. That's alpha, and you can see this apps button right here in green, it's B. Right now, the calculator is going to remember when we type out a B, it's remembering the number 3. Hit -5, store that, and we'll say alpha C. Hit enter, and you can see, everything is good to go. Now, personally, what I suggest doing is I'll just have kids type in b squared minus 4ac. We won't type out all of the quadratic formula at this point. If we did, we'd get decimals, and that's okay for a later problem. But for right now, we want to be able to get radicals with our answers. You can see when we type in b squared minus 4ac, we'll get 29. So here's what I'm getting at. We're going to recopy all of this, but we already know that b squared minus 4ac is really just 29. That big mess right there inside the radical works out really nice. Now when you take the opposite of b right here, you're going to have -3. And then down below in that denominator, you're going to have 2 times a. Your a, of course, is just this 1, so that's 2 times 1. So wonderfully, you're going to have -3 plus or minus radical 29 all over 2. If you can reduce your square root, you should. You won't always be able to do that. 29 is actually a prime number, and we can't break that down any further. What you could do, of course, is always break this into 2 separate fractions, much the same way we've been doing with our complex numbers. And that's just to point out we're going to get 2 distinct answers. You'd get decimals. This wouldn't be integers. But this is a way to always find your 2 solutions. So it's a wonderful, foolproof way to get your answers. Just want to let you know your answers can have an imaginary component. If that square root happens to be negative, you'll have to take out an I. And we have to be prepared for that. Let's take a look at number 2. Number 2, you're going to have A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, and C is equal to 2. Now again, my suggestion to you is to quickly store those values in for A, B, and C. Hit 1, store A, 2, store, and here we go, alpha B. Hit that alpha and then the apps button. Finally, we'll hit 2, store, then we'll hit alpha C. Now, at this point, all you got to work out is what b squared minus 4ac is. And you get that, and you're going to get -4. And that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you're going to get your b squared to be negative. B squared minus 4ac to be negative. What am I getting at? Look at the top of this screen here just for a second. That b squared minus 4ac is the number you're going to have inside of that square root. We know that as we work this thing out, we're going to have answers of opposite b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We now know that the inside portion here is the number -4. Outside, if this is opposite b, we're going to have a -2 out in front. Down below we have 2a, so that's going to be 2 times just a 1. So our answer is going to have to be broken down. -2 plus or minus, well, remember what we've been doing. If we have a negative inside of the square root, we have to pull out an I. Now down below, 2 times 1 is just a 2. But again, what's the square root of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is a perfect square. It's just 2. So wonderfully, we're going to get -2 plus or minus 2I all over 2. Now, so very often kids want to stop right here. But the bottom line is, you might be able to reduce. That's why we always want you to go into two separate fractions. Take negative 2 over 2 plus or minus 2I all over 2. Now, negative 2 over 2 is going to leave you simply with negative 1. 2 over 2, well, that wipes out to just a 1 also, so you can have 1I. What are we seeing? Well, plain and simply, we're going to have two complex answers, negative 1 plus I, negative 1 minus I. There is a second part to the lesson, but we're actually going to go to a new video to wrap up that final part.